One of the rewards for our donors during our crowdfunding phase was a video scrapbook, and we had all these great stories and insights we also wanted to share. So we did this video commentary and mystery science theater mashup on top of it. But I think you guys will really enjoy it. So here it goes.
So this all really started in the spring of 2016. I knew I was going to have access to Gary because I've known him from growing up. And you wanted to do this documentary where you can use this candidate as a vehicle to show areas where the system sort of contributes to polarization rather than just being like, bah, burn the whole thing down. But no one was into it. So I was going to hang up the project and just randomly caught up with John, and he was looking to make a move into journalism. So we sort of talked about this and came up with a more generalized and cheaper plan of action that we could potentially crowdfund. And that was it. We were on board and going.
So like 2 days after I agreed to do this project with Jake, he shoots me a text saying, "Hey, can you be there Thursday at 1 p.m.?" There's $10,000 worth of photo equipment showing up. So that's when when the project started to feel real. I'm holding it very far away. Now I am holding it very close. Far away. And close.
We just sort of started doing interviews around the DC area to get a sense of just how to interview and get a temperature of the streets, and we knew we'd use some of it for B-roll.
I never really shot before, so it was just get out there and film and see what you like, see what you don't like, and just kind of make it work. It was fun.
All right, am I coming? My audio picked up?
We're only showing I don't know, a handful of places, but we probably went to 6 or so different places for these.
So we were doing these street interviews not only to get footage for ourselves, but to also get an idea of where the country was at on a more personal level. And we were asking questions like, what are your major issues when considering who you're going to vote for? And we get some pretty good answers, like this guy coming up.
The third one is, let's see, who getting them damn honey buns in that snack machine right behind you? That is going to be the one.
All
That's
right.
going to be the one. Mm-hmm.
Fearless driver.
In 1,000 feet, continue on through Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast.
Fearless navigator.
So this was our first actual sit-down interview we did with Professor Andrew Gelman, and I just remember being so nervous setting up the gear. I didn't want to get back to the house and find out that I filmed with the lens cap on or something stupid like that.
Cool. Everything good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The fact that I had access to Gary is what makes this whole project possible. Once the CNN town hall got booked, we just drove to NYC to witness it. Gary rode the subway. No one recognized him. Kind of crazy. John took the car back after the fact, and I rode the train to DC with him. He got a little more attention on that train in Union Station, probably 4 or so people stopping him. My favorite Gary quote, which we didn't put in either, is he borrowed this paper to jot down a stump speech. He sort of says, "It's good if someone goes up to speak and they have paper, because it means there's an end."
So meeting Fair Vote for us was huge. Before we had just been kind of pulling this thread around the idea of, despite 75% of the country not knowing who Gary Johnson was, he was still getting 9% in the presidential polls. And Fair Vote been doing this for years and years and years, right? So they had this big systemic idea of how the system worked and even some plans on how to reform it. So to meet them was really refreshing.
Most people have some issue that's most important to them that isn't elections. And I respect that, if it's global warming or if it's criminal justice or whatever the case may be. But for everyone, in my opinion, elections needs to be the second thing that they think is most important. Because fundamentally, that's going to be the thing that makes it so that whatever their first issue is, that gets a fair hearing.
Drew was great, and we never really used any of his footage, so sorry, Drew. Oh, God. We took more time to set up this interview than any other one, and we actually never ended up using it. So, in general, we never spent any time scouting. It was kind of a style choice. It was also kind of a practical choice. We were first-timers with no reel, and the only thing kind of showing that we can do anything is this footage that we had with Gary. You can't get a day of someone's time, but you can get an hour and a half. Anyway, we eventually figured this out down the line, some of our last interviews, and made the chaos of the locations a little bit more of the edit instead of fighting it. But that decision to just let the camera runs is why you'd sometimes hear stuff like this.
Yes.
So for a while, we were playing around with the idea of being characters or guides throughout the documentary series. We decided not to go that way, mostly because I just hate being in front of the camera. Ugh.
We are going to meet with. Now do it? All right. Hi.
So this is Alexandra Shapiro. She's definitely one of our favorite interviews. She's just a really cool lady and a total badass with what she does. And she's a lawyer trying to open up debate access. And the interview, she was just incredibly well-spoken and so informative, breaking down all this legal mumbo-jumbo to us laymen.
This Alexandra interview is key as well, because it actually gave us access to Peter Ackerman, who's a central figure in a lot of the reforms we're covering.
So maybe, where do you put it? Here, here, or here? No possibility. Here, here, or here.
No possibility, you're going here. Am I right or wrong?
You gotta work on your economics.
Okay.
There's a man named Helvig.
And with that, we
And you're a
definitely
Democrat,
weren't getting
I'm a
funding from
Republican.
Peter.
You're a Republican, it doesn't matter.
The DC Metro machines were sort of adding injury to insult as well. These things are confusing. But a bit of a serious note here for a minute. During this period, it really did sink in what we were doing. We were poking around political institutions and people who were going to have an impact on this election. And the people that were going on camera were not only trusting us with their reputations by going on camera, but they were also trying to persuade us on their point of view on things, and we had to filter that. And, you know, at this point in time, you're dealing with former press secretaries, so amateur hour is over. So our first episode had sort of this tough needle to thread. There's a reason the two parties took over, but it's hurting things now, and they're ignoring really strong new evidence that is playing a role in polarization. So that's still the main question is, why 15%? Why not try these other methods? Timing-wise, we had just launched our crowdfunding campaign, and when your circles are DC, Los Angeles, New York, like a lot of people were freaked out by Trump's acceptance speech at the RNC. So it was a real gut check on why we were doing what we were doing.
So this is us heading up to Philadelphia to cover the DNC, and we had gotten attention from the Green Party, which turned into access to Jill, which is fantastic. We didn't get to interview her here, but we definitely made some connections that helped out down the line. And for the weekend, we followed Jill around as she tried to mop up Bernie Sanders supporters that were pissed off. So this is this socialist movement in this sweaty church with no AC. Everyone smells bad, but it was just this awesome environment. It was electric.
Or that.
If you're ever doing a crowd-funded project and working on a shoestring budget, I strongly suggest trying to get access to a Prius, because I can't even tell you how much money it saved us, especially on this trip to New Hampshire to meet up with the Libertarians getting access there.
1,000 signatures. You don't have to vote for them or anything like that. It's Gary Johnson, yeah. Yeah, there you go. That's your vote. Boom. Yeah. You say you helped get him on the ballot.
So this next clip we couldn't use because the audio was really bad, but try and take a listen here. It's a good explainer of how much it actually costs to get on the ballot for the Libertarians in New Hampshire.
650.
Like, what does that boil down to, man hours of like people standing out in front of Market Basket?
You look at somebody did all this work, right? Cost all this money, cost money for these. You look at all the money that we spent on this petition drive and all the man hours we spent. Habitat for Humanity put about 2,000.
Donated money to
Really?
the
That's crazy.
No, we got paper.
And they had to do this every 2 years, and the rules continue to get harder and harder, but somehow they managed to keep a great sense of humor about it all.
For Derry and Dover.
There's Derry.
Yes. Come to Derry and smell that dairy air.
That's good. So this was by far my favorite day of shooting. We showed up to interview the head of the Maine Libertarian Party while he was throwing this big lobster bash for his neighborhood. We show up, they have us in stitches, we're laughing all night, give them a couple bucks here and there for beer and lobster, and we drove lawnmowers till sunset. What else can you want out of a day at the office? And while we were there, we checked out a citizens initiative in Maine to implement ranked choice voting, which is a new voting system.
Room tone.
More civility in our politics and less polarization.
Shanna was awesome. We had no idea who she was or that she'd be at this house event, and we grabbed her for like 10 minutes, and she ended up having like 2 minutes to herself in her episode. So, you know, sometimes you just luck out.
So we would send out our rough cuts for critiques, and people would say stuff like, you lost me here, or the story's a little bit weak here, but definitely keep the ducks. I really like the ducks.
So this is Fair Vote Maine, and while we were there, we talked with Doug Klopp, who's a political reform veteran, and he had this really good framework for how to think of the structural reforms that we were looking at in context of democracy reform in general. And it didn't make sense to use this clip in an episode, but I totally stole it for a blog post with credit that I wrote while we were crowdfunding. So thanks, Doug.
Reform. I often talk about democracy reform as 3 pillars. That first pillar being money in politics, campaign finance reform. The second pillar for that healthy republic is making sure that everybody who's eligible to vote can vote, does vote. The third pillar is the structural piece, the systems piece. And that's the piece that often gets the shortest shrift. Ranked choice voting is that structural change.
That's my bad. Pretty bad. Nice and spotty.
A lot of love goes out to those canvassers, Dave and Aaliyah. That's hard work in the hot sun. And then they had to deal with us 2 schmucks slowing them down with all of our camera gear. Thanks a lot, guys.
7 hours. Oh, dominoes. Oh, I'm pretty good. Watch out.
Thanks for having us. So that's Tom, and Tom loves Jake. And whenever we meet up with Gary and his crew, Tom would always meet Jake with his big hug and a smile. It was just funny. And so this is actually a couple days after Aleppo. You can't hear it too well here, but it's Gary talking about that, you know, if it wasn't Aleppo, it was going to be something else. He would screw up or have a misstep.
And this is late enough in the election where people are looking for a reason to knock him out of the race for good.
Going down Saginaw, Flint, Michigan on a beautiful day.
So this is the Flint, Michigan Independent Presidential Candidate Forum, and it just blows my mind that 1,800 people wanted to be president this year.
God bless these people, because you think they're crazy, and they are. Anyone who runs for president is crazy. But you can tell that they just get fueled by these conversations with voters who don't otherwise feel like they're getting listened to. The Baltimore Green event was something else, man. They had some poets and performers that just gave some fierce performances, and there's a lot of emotion going up on that stage.
Here I am, the poet, and I am impotent. I am dumb. I am speechless. Every word I have ever written is crashing at my feet. I do not know what to say to him. So I say what every teacher says. Why don't you write your mommy a poem? Your mommy would really like that. Who the fuck am I kidding? If he does not have a pencil, how can he write a poem?
And then compare that to Hofstra, where the debates were being held, and there was, like, no one.
How does the polar bear feel about Gary Johnson and Jill Stein?
Well, bears do not vote, but I will say that we need Jill Stein, Gary Johnson, Donald Trump, and Hillary Clinton, all 4 of them, helping me.
So Hofstra was a bit of a letdown. You know, we were expecting Clinton and Trump supporters to be there en masse at each other's throats and then pissed off Greens and Libertarians for missing debates, but it was really just a couple select specific protests, like these Haitians. Haitians hate the Clintons. Had to meet the duck quota, right? Got to give the people what they want. Nothing goes better with hard-hitting investigative journalism than cute, fuzzy fowl.
Doing this, helping out some guy I met. He's really cool. Looks good.
Stop it.
Ready when you are.
Cool.
That was probably the fourth person to hit on me while doing interviews. I do pretty good in New Mexico. I might have to move there someday.
Despite having done interviews for 6 months now and for the most part feeling comfortable, John got really nervous interviewing Nick in front of Bill Weld for some reason. He ended up asking like the same exact question like 3 different times.
So this Congo line is what I think Gary Johnson would look like if he was a caterpillar.
The Trump Tower, the recount.
So all this recount footage almost didn't happen. We had the pseudo confirmation from the Green Party. I personally went to an engagement party. It was like 10 o'clock on a Saturday, and I got a text from Jake saying, I'm going to New York. So yeah, he went up. You know, it's another thing. Keep filming, say yes, and good stuff happens. So this guy coming up who's about to complain about Jill. If you freeze frame right about here, yeah, his fly's open. So coming up is a follow-up interview with Alexander Shapiro about the court case that just got held.
And as you saw earlier, we had already interviewed her, so we'd probably met her in person for maybe 2 hours and a phone call and a couple emails. But in post-production for that first episode, you know, John and I are looking at that footage for hours, days. So you actually start to feel like you know the subject because you're watching that footage for so long. So we tried to explain that to her, and we're like, hey, it's so good to see you. And she's like, who are you guys?
So yeah, that about sums it up. Here's a nice little poetic shot of the Capitol building. And yeah, thanks for listening, guys.
And thanks for your support. We really couldn't have done this without you. So thank you. And hopefully you guys all learned something and gained a lot out of it because we certainly did.